The red dust of Mars swirled around Dr. Lisa Martinez as she carefully brushed away centuries of accumulated sediment from what appeared to be a metallic surface. The morning sun cast long shadows across the excavation site, and the thin atmosphere made every breath a conscious effort even through her environmental suit. She had been working on this dig for 3 months now, following electromagnetic readings that suggested something artificial lay buried beneath the Martian surface. "Jake? Come look at this," she called to her partner, Commander Jake Thompson, who was setting up the ground-penetrating radar equipment nearby. The military man turned toward her voice, his heavy boots crunching on the rocky terrain as he approached her position. Jake knelt beside Lisa and examined the surface she had uncovered. The metal was unlike anything either of them had seen before. It seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and strange symbols were etched across its surface in precise geometric patterns. The material felt warm to the touch even through their protective gloves, which was impossible given the freezing Martian environment. "This isn't human-made," Jake said, his voice filled with wonder. "The composition readings are completely off the charts. The metal contains elements that shouldn't exist in stable form." Lisa nodded as she continued her careful excavation. "The dating equipment suggests this structure is millions of years old. That predates any known galactic civilization by an enormous margin." As they worked together to uncover more of the structure, it became clear they had found something extraordinary. The building extended deep underground, its architecture following alien design principles that hurt to look at directly. Corridors bent in directions that seemed geometrically impossible, and rooms opened into spaces that appeared larger on the inside than the outside. Deep within the structure, they discovered a chamber filled with crystalline formations that pulsed with soft blue light. In the center of the room sat a single data crystal, perfectly preserved and waiting. When Lisa approached it, the crystal began to glow more brightly, and symbols appeared in the air above it. "It's responding to our presence," Jake observed, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. "Should we be worried about alien booby traps?" Lisa shook her head as she studied the floating symbols. "I don't think so. This feels more like a message than a trap. The symbols are mathematical in nature, universal concepts that any intelligent species would understand." She carefully removed the crystal from its resting place, and immediately both of their translation devices began working frantically to decode the information flooding through their neural implants. The message was clear and terrifying. The crystal contained warnings about an ancient enemy called the Void Stalkers, beings that existed partially outside normal space and time. These parasitic entities consumed entire star systems, turning matter and energy into more of themselves in an endless cycle of hunger and destruction. The warnings came from a race called the Architects, who had barely survived the last encounter by retreating into dimensional hibernation. "According to this data, the Void Stalkers return in cycles," Lisa said, her face pale as she processed the information. "And the next awakening is scheduled to begin in approximately 6 months. Jake immediately activated his emergency communication link to Earth. Within hours, military transports were racing toward Mars to collect both researchers and the alien crystal. The discovery was too important to risk losing to an accident or equipment failure. President Helen Carter received the news in her private office in Washington. The middle-aged woman had dealt with many crises during her presidency, but nothing like this. She immediately called an emergency session of her top advisors and scientists. Dr. Carlos Rivera, Earth's leading expert in alien languages and cultures, spent 3 days analyzing the crystal's contents. His team worked around the clock to decode additional layers of information hidden within the device. What they found made the initial warnings seem optimistic. "The Void Stalkers aren't just dangerous to individual planets," Carlos explained to the Emergency Council. "They consume entire regions of space, leaving nothing behind but empty void." The architects described them as reality parasites that feed on the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. The crystal contained detailed star charts showing where the Void Stalkers would first emerge. The location was near the galactic rim in a region currently controlled by several major galactic powers. If the entities appeared there as predicted, they would have access to dozens of heavily populated star systems. President Carter made the decision that would change humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. We have to warn the Galactic Council immediately. This information is too important to keep to ourselves. Ambassador Nicole Brooks received her orders within hours. The experienced diplomat had served as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council for 5 years, dealing with the condescension and dismissal that most alien species showed toward humanity. Earth was still considered a minor power. Having joined galactic society less than a century ago, Nicole packed the alien crystal and all supporting documentation into a secure, diplomatic pouch. Her ship, the diplomatic vessel New Horizon, departed Earth orbit with maximum priority clearance. The journey to Kepler Station, where the Galactic Council maintained its headquarters, would take 2 weeks at maximum speed. During the journey, Nicole studied every piece of information about the Void Stalkers. The architect warnings included tactical information about previous encounters, descriptions of the entity's capabilities, and most importantly, hints about potential weaknesses. The ancient race had learned that conventional energy weapons were useless against beings that existed partially outside normal space. The crystal also contained fragments of architect technology, including principles behind their dimensional manipulation devices. Earth scientists were already working to understand these concepts, hoping to develop new defensive technologies before the predicted emergence date. As the New Horizon approached Kepler Station, Nicole felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She carried information that could save billions of lives, but she also knew the challenges she would face. The Galactic Council had consistently dismissed Earth's contributions to galactic affairs, treating humans as inexperienced newcomers who had nothing valuable to offer. The massive space station came into view, its rings spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. Representatives from over 200 species lived and worked within its corridors, managing the complex politics of galactic civilization. Nicole had walked those halls many times before, usually to present human perspectives that were politely ignored. This time would be different. This time she carried proof of a threat that could destroy everything the Galactic Council had built. Whether they would listen remained to be seen, but Nicole was determined to make them understand the magnitude of what was coming. The New Horizon docked at the diplomatic port, and Nicole gathered her materials for what might be the most important presentation in galactic history. The Great Council chamber on Kepler Station buzzed with conversation as representatives from across the galaxy took their assigned positions. Ambassador Nicole Brooks walked through the towering doors, her diplomatic credentials allowing her access to the inner circle where the most powerful species conducted galactic business. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, with atmospheric controls that allowed hundreds of different species to breathe comfortably in the same space. Nicole made her way to the human section, a modest area near the back of the chamber. Earth's position in galactic politics was clearly reflected in their seating arrangement, far from the central podium where the major powers held court. She clutched the secure case containing the architect crystal and supporting documentation, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of billions of lives. High Chancellor Vexenol of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the center podium, his imposing figure commanding attention from across the chamber. The Zephyrians were a warrior race that had built their empire through military conquest, and their representative reflected their species' aggressive nature. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of countless battles, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a born predator. The Council recognizes the human representative, Vexenol announced, his voice carrying a tone of barely concealed disdain. What trivial matter brings Earth before this august body today? Nicole stepped forward, activating the holographic display system that would allow all representatives to see the information she was about to present. Honorable members of the Council, Earth has discovered evidence of an imminent threat to all galactic civilization. We have uncovered warnings left by an ancient race about entities called the Void Stalkers. A ripple of laughter passed through the chamber as Nicole began her presentation. The holographic display showed images of the Martian ruins, the alien crystal, and the translated warnings about the approaching danger. She explained the timeline, the predicted emergence location, and the devastating capabilities of the Void Stalkers as described by the architects Tech-Prime Vexara of the Nexari. Confederation stood to address the chamber. The Nexari were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and scientific achievements. Their representative was a tall, thin being with metallic implants that enhanced their already formidable intellect. "This is clearly archaeological fantasy," Vexara declared. "The humans present us with fairy tales from extinct civilizations and expect us to take them seriously." The other representatives murmured their agreement as Vexara continued her dismissal. "Our sensors monitor every corner of galactic space. If such entities existed, our technology would have detected them long ago." The human tendency toward primitive superstition is well documented. Supreme Arbiter Quolin of the Valdorian Republic rose slowly from his position at the head of the chamber. The Valdorians were the oldest species in the Galactic Council, having achieved spaceflight, when most other races were still discovering fire. Their representative appeared ancient even by their species standards, with skin like weathered stone and eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "Young humans," Quolin said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia. "My people have guided galactic civilization for over 50,000 years. We have faced every conceivable threat and emerged victorious. No force in this galaxy could challenge the combined might of the Council fleet." Nicole tried to interrupt, to explain the unique nature of the Void Stalkers and why conventional military might would prove useless against them, but Quolin raised a hand for silence, and the chamber fell quiet out of respect for his authority. The Valdorian archives contain no reference to these supposed Void Stalkers, the ancient being continued. "If such entities had ever threatened galactic civilization, we would have records of their existence. The humans mistake legend for fact, as is common among species who have not yet learned to separate truth from mythology." The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives debated the human warning. Most voices were dismissive, treating the presentation as entertainment rather than a serious threat assessment. The Corellian delegate suggested that humanity was attempting to gain attention through sensationalism. The Altarian representative wondered aloud, if the humans had fabricated the entire discovery to increase their standing in galactic politics. Nicole watched in growing horror as species after species dismissed the warning without serious consideration. She presented additional evidence, including detailed technical specifications from the architect crystal and star charts showing the predicted emergence points. The council members barely glanced at the data before returning to their conversations. "Hi." Chancellor Thexanol called for order and announced that the council would vote on whether to investigate the human claims. "All those in favor of treating this matter seriously indicate now." Only 3 hands were raised in the vast chamber. Earth's vote was joined by the representatives of 2 minor species from the Outer Rim, worlds that had experienced their own encounters with unexplained phenomena. The remaining 847 members of the council voted to dismiss the warning as unfounded. "Speculation. The matter is settled," Vexanol declared with satisfaction. "The council will not waste resources on human fairy tales." Nicole made one final desperate plea. "At least send a small investigation fleet to the coordinates provided by the crystal. If we're wrong, you lose nothing. If we're right, early detection could save countless lives." The council members laughed openly at her suggestion. Tech Prime Vexara suggested that perhaps a single ship could be spared to humor the humans. "Send one of our oldest exploration vessels," she said mockingly. "Let it investigate these imaginary monsters and report back with its findings of empty space." Supreme Arbiter Quolin nodded his approval. "The exploration ship Infinite Reach will investigate the coordinates provided by Earth. When it finds nothing but vacuum and starlight, perhaps the humans will learn not to waste the council's time with ancient superstitions." As the session concluded, Nicole gathered her materials with a heavy heart. She had failed to convince the galaxy's leaders of the approaching danger, and time was running short. The architect warnings indicated that preliminary signs of the Void Stalker emergence would begin appearing within 3 months. During her return journey to Earth, Nicole composed her report for President Carter. The diplomatic mission had achieved nothing except to demonstrate the arrogance and short-sightedness of the galactic powers. Earth would have to prepare for the coming crisis alone, with only their own resources and ingenuity to rely upon. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Admiral Ryan Foster had already begun his own preparations. The gruff military commander had spent his entire career studying alien military tactics and technologies. He understood better than most that humanity's survival often depended on thinking differently than their galactic neighbors. Admiral Foster gathered his staff at the secure military facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. Unlike the Galactic Council, he took the architect warning seriously and had already begun developing contingency plans. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability and unconventional thinking, traits that might prove crucial in the coming conflict. The Admiral's daughter, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster, presented the latest intelligence reports on galactic fleet movements. "The Council is proceeding with business as usual," she reported. "They're showing no signs of increased military readiness or defensive preparations." Admiral Foster nodded grimly as he studied the tactical displays. "Then we're on our own." "Begin implementing Protocol 7 immediately. I want every available ship equipped with our latest weapon systems and ready for deployment within 60 days. 3 months passed since the Galactic Council dismissed Earth's warning, and strange readings began appearing on long-range sensors across the galaxy. The Council's token exploration ship, the GSV Infinite Reach, had arrived at the coordinates provided by the Architect Crystal and found exactly what they expected to find. Nothing but empty space and distant stars. Captain Veltar of the Infinite Reach transmitted his report back to Council headquarters with smug satisfaction. As predicted, the human coordinates contain no unusual activity. Sensors detect only normal background radiation and cosmic dust. The supposed threat appears to be nothing more than primitive imagination running wild. The Galactic Council received this report with great satisfaction, using it as further proof that humanity's warnings were groundless. High Chancellor Thexanel publicly mocked Earth's archaeological fantasies during the next council session, drawing laughter from representatives across the chamber. However, far from the council's comfortable chambers, Dr. Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the Earthship UES Defiant, studying readings that painted a very different picture. The human vessel had arrived in the same region of space as the Infinite Reach, but their sensors told a completely different story. "Commander Thompson, take a look at these quantum fluctuation readings," Lisa said, pointing to her display screen. "The space here is definitely not empty. Something is causing massive distortions in the fabric of reality itself." Jake Thompson moved to her side and examined the data streaming across the monitors. Unlike the crude sensors used by most galactic species, human technology had been upgraded with principles learned from the Architect Crystal. The modifications allowed their equipment to detect phenomena that existed partially outside normal spacetime. "The distortions are getting stronger," Jake observed. "Whatever's causing them is building up energy for something big." Dr. Peter Kim, Earth's leading quantum physicist, had spent the past 3 months developing new detection methods based on the Architect technology. His team had discovered that the Void Stalkers existed in a state of dimensional phase shifting, moving between parallel layers of reality in ways that made them invisible to conventional sensors. "The entities aren't emerging in our normal space," Peter explained over the communication link from Earth. "They're phasing in from a parallel dimension where they've been dormant for millions of years. That's why the Council ships can't detect them. Their sensors only work in our reality layer." Captain Susan Blake, commander of the UES Defiant, ordered her crew to begin detailed scans of the area using their modified equipment. The results were terrifying. Hidden beneath layers of dimensional folding, massive shapes were stirring to life. The Void Stalkers were beginning their awakening process, just as the Architect warnings had predicted. How many of them are there? Susan asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Lisa checked her readings again, hoping she had made an error. Based on the energy signatures, I'm detecting at least 50 large entities, each one roughly the size of a small moon, but they're not solid matter as we understand it. They seem to be made of dark matter and corrupted energy fields. As the human crew watched in fascination and horror, the first Void Stalker scout began materializing in normal space. The entity appeared slowly, like a shadow gaining substance, until it became visible as a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Strange patterns moved across its surface, and tendrils of energy reached out to touch nearby. Asteroids. The moment the Void Stalker made contact with solid matter, the asteroids began to change. The rock and metal dissolved into the same dark energy that composed the entity, effectively feeding it and making it grow larger. Within minutes, the scout had consumed an entire asteroid field and doubled in size. It's converting matter into more of itself, Jake said, his voice filled with awe and fear. The architects were right. These things are reality parasites. The feeding process triggered a chain reaction throughout the region. More Void Stalkers began phasing into normal space, drawn by the energy released from their scouts' feeding. Each new entity immediately began consuming available matter, growing larger and spawning additional offspring. Through some form of asexual reproduction, Susan immediately ordered her communications officer to transmit an emergency warning to both Earth and the Galactic Council. The message contained detailed sensor readings, visual recordings of the Void Stalkers, and updated threat assessments based on their observed behavior. Earth received the transmission within hours and immediately began implementing emergency protocols. Admiral Foster activated the human fleet and began moving ships toward the emergence zone. President Carter authorized the release of classified weapon systems that had been developed in secret over the past 3 months. The Galactic Council, however, treated the human warning with the same dismissive attitude they had shown before. Tech Prime Vexara publicly stated that the humans were obviously using holographic projections and sensor manipulation to create false evidence. Supreme Arbiter Quaylen suggested that Earth was trying to justify their earlier archaeological fantasies through elaborate deception. The humans grow desperate in their attempts to gain attention, Quaylen announced to the council chamber. They present us with obvious fabrications and expect us to believe their primitive sensors can detect what our advanced technology cannot. Meanwhile, the Void Stalkers continued their expansion across the Outer Rim territories. Mining colonies on the edge of civilized space began reporting strange phenomena, equipment failures, power drains, and in some cases, entire facilities simply vanishing without explanation. These reports reached the council, but were dismissed as normal industrial accidents or equipment failures. The first major colony to be consumed was Kepler-7, a mining world inhabited by 50,000 beings from various species. The Void Stalkers arrived without warning, phasing directly into the planet's atmosphere. Within hours, the entire world had been converted into dark energy and absorbed into the growing swarm. Emergency distress signals from Kepler-7 reached the council just as the planet went dark. The transmission cut off mid-sentence as the communications array was consumed along with everything else on the world. For the first time, council members began to show signs of concern, though many still refused to connect the disappearance to the human warnings. Dr. Martinez continued her observations from the UES Defiant, documenting the Void Stalkers' behavior and capabilities. The entities seemed to be following some kind of organized plan, spreading outward from their emergence point in a coordinated pattern. They were not simply random predators, they displayed intelligence and strategy in their expansion. They're heading for the populated sectors, Lisa reported to Earth Command. Based on their current trajectory, they'll reach the first major colony worlds within days. The quantum disruption caused by the Void Stalkers' feeding was having effects far beyond simple matter consumption. Space itself was becoming unstable in the affected regions, making faster-than-light travel impossible. Ships that attempted to enter the contaminated zones simply vanished, Their crews lost to the dimensional instability. Jake Thompson studied the tactical implications of what they were witnessing. Conventional weapons won't work against these things. They absorb energy attacks and use them to grow stronger. Physical projectiles pass right through their semi-dimensional forms. We need something completely different. Peter Kim's voice came through the communication link with urgent excitement. I think I've found something in the architect data. There are references to quantum disruption fields that can damage entities existing between dimensions. The key is catching them during their phase transitions when they're vulnerable. The human research teams worked frantically to develop weapons based on the architect principles. Time was running out as more colonies went dark and the Void Stalker swarm continued to grow. Earth's small fleet was humanity's only hope of stopping an invasion that threatened to consume the entire galaxy. The emergency alarms echoed through the council chambers on Kepler Station as reports flooded in from across the Outer Rim territories. Entire star systems were going dark within hours, their distress signals cutting off mid-transmission. The disappearances followed a clear pattern, spreading outward from the coordinates that Earth had warned about months earlier. High Chancellor Thexanol stood before the emergency assembly, his scaled features showing the first signs of concern that anyone had seen in decades. Behind him, holographic displays showed the advancing zone of darkness where the Void Stalkers had consumed everything in their path. Red markers indicated lost colonies, mining stations, and trading posts that had simply vanished from all contact. The Outer Rim Mining Guilds report complete loss of contact with 17 colonies in the past 48 hours. Vexenol announced to the assembled representatives. Long-range sensors detect massive energy disruptions in the affected regions, but no signs of conventional military activity. Tech Prime Vexara activated her personal data interface, accessing the Nexari Confederation's most advanced sensor networks. The readings confused and frightened her in ways she had never experienced before. Our deep space monitoring stations are detecting spatial anomalies that defy all known physics. The affected regions appear to be consuming light itself, creating zones of absolute darkness that expand continuously. Supreme Arbiter Quaylen sat in his ancient chair, reviewing reports that challenged everything the Valdorians believed about galactic security. For 50,000 years, his people had maintained order through military superiority and advanced technology. No threat had ever emerged that their combined fleets could not handle. "Assemble the Grand Armada immediately," Quillen commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Whatever force is responsible for these attacks will face the full might of galactic civilization." Within hours, the greatest military mobilization in galactic history began taking shape. Ships from dozens of species converged on staging areas throughout Council space. The Zephyrian Empire contributed their massive dreadnoughts, vessels capable of cracking planets with their primary weapons. The Nexari brought their reality-warping ships that could fold space itself into weapons of destruction. The Valdorian Republic deployed their ancient but incredibly powerful world ships, mobile planets, that served as both battleships and manufacturing centers. Smaller species added their specialized vessels to the growing armada, creating a fleet of over 50,000 ships representing the pinnacle of galactic military technology. Fleet Admiral Zekthar of the combined Zephyrian-Valdorian forces took command of the armada from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The massive vessel stretched for kilometers and carried enough firepower to sterilize entire solar systems. Its crew included representatives from every major species, demonstrating the unity of purpose that the crisis had created. All fleet commanders report ready for immediate deployment, Admiral Zekthar announced during the final briefing. Our mission is simple: locate the source of these attacks and destroy it completely. No force in this galaxy can stand against our combined might. The Armada departed from their staging areas with great ceremony and absolute confidence. The combined fleet represented thousands of years of military development and technological advancement. Their energy weapons could tear holes in reality itself, and their defensive systems had never been breached by any known enemy. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster monitored the fleet movements from Earth's hidden observation post in the asteroid belt. The young officer watched in horror as the Council's armada proceeded directly toward the Void Stalker territory, completely unaware of what they were about to face. "Admiral, the Council fleet is maintaining standard battle formations," Amy reported. To her father, "They're treating this like a conventional military engagement. They have no idea what these entities are capable of." Admiral Foster studied the tactical displays with growing dread. He had spent months analyzing the architect warnings and understood better than anyone how useless conventional weapons would be against the Void Stalkers. "Continue monitoring and record everything. The galaxy needs to see what happens when arrogance meets reality." The Grand Armada reached the edge of Void Stalker territory and immediately encountered the first signs of the enemy. Dozens of the dark entities floated in space, their semi-dimensional forms barely visible against the starfield. Each creature was the size of a small moon, writhing with internal energy that seemed to devour light itself. Admiral Zekthar ordered the fleet to assume attack formation, confident that their superior numbers and firepower would quickly overwhelm any resistance. "All ships prepare primary weapons. Target the largest entities first and work systematically through their formation." The first wave of attacks began with devastating force. Planet-killer energy beams lanced out from thousands of ships, concentrating enough power to vaporize entire worlds. The weapons struck the Void Stalkers directly, creating brilliant explosions that lit up the darkness of space. For a moment, it seemed as though the attack had succeeded. The targeted entities appeared to stagger under the assault, their forms flickering and wavering. Admiral Zekthar smiled with satisfaction, already planning his victory announcement to the Council. Then the impossible happened. The Void Stalkers began to glow brighter, their forms becoming more solid and defined. The energy from the weapons had not damaged them at all. Instead, it had fed them, making them larger and stronger than before. Within minutes, each targeted entity had doubled in size and spawned additional offspring. "Impossible," Zekthar whispered as his sensors registered the truth. "They're absorbing our weapons fire and using it to multiply." The fleet commanders tried different approaches, launching kinetic projectiles and exotic matter weapons at the entities. The physical attacks passed harmlessly through the Void Stalkers' semi-dimensional forms, having no effect whatsoever. The creatures existed partially outside normal space, making them immune to conventional physical damage. The Void Stalkers began their counterattack with terrifying efficiency. Tendrils of dark energy reached out from each entity, touching the nearest Council ships. The moment contact was made, the vessels began to change. Hull metal dissolved into the same dark matter that composed the creatures, and crew members screamed as their bodies were converted into pure energy. Ship after ship fell to the Void Stalkers' corruption, their matter and energy being absorbed and transformed into more enemies. The infected vessels turned on their former allies, their weapons now firing streams of reality-corrupting force that spread the contamination throughout the fleet. Admiral Zekthar watched in horror as his magnificent armada was systematically consumed. The Eternal Dominion's shields held for several minutes longer than the smaller vessels, but eventually even the flagship's advanced defenses failed. Dark tendrils penetrated the bridge, and the Admiral's final transmission carried the sound of his own transformation. "All ships, retreat impossible. They eat light itself, consuming everything." The message cut off as the Eternal Dominion joined the growing swarm of corrupted vessels. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes from first contact to the final ship's conversion. The greatest military force ever assembled had been completely destroyed, transformed into weapons for the enemy they had tried to defeat. Not a single Council vessel escaped to carry word of the disaster back to civilization. Amy Foster recorded every moment of the massacre from her concealed observation post. The quantum sensors captured details that would have been invisible to conventional equipment, including the exact moment when each ship's crew was converted into Void Stalker energy. "My God," she whispered as the last of the armada vanished. Into the swarm. They turned our greatest strength into their weapon. Conventional military force is completely useless against these things. The Void Stalkers had grown exponentially from their feast, and now numbered in the thousands. Each entity was larger and more powerful than before, and the swarm was beginning to move toward the populated core worlds of galactic civilization. Time was running out for everyone. The news of the Grand Armada's complete destruction reached the remaining council members within hours, sending waves of panic throughout galactic civilization. Emergency sessions were called on every major world as species that had dismissed Earth's warnings just months earlier now faced the reality of an unstoppable enemy advancing toward their home systems. High Chancellor Thexanol stood before the emergency assembly, his proud demeanor replaced by desperate fear. Behind him, the holographic displays showed the expanding zone of corruption where the Void Stalkers continued to grow in numbers and strength. The dark swarm now contained thousands of entities, each one capable of consuming entire worlds. The situation is beyond our current capabilities, Thexanol admitted, his voice breaking with the weight of his words. Our greatest weapons have proven useless, and our most advanced technology cannot even detect these entities properly. We must seek alternative solutions immediately. Tech Prime Vixara activated her personal communication systems, reaching out to scientific institutes across Nixari space. All research facilities are to begin immediate analysis of the human data that was dismissed months ago. Perhaps their primitive sensors detected something our advanced technology missed. Supreme Arbiter Quolan sat in stunned silence, processing the impossible reality that his ancient civilization faced extinction. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Valdorian Republic was powerless against a threat. His advisors whispered urgently about evacuation, plans and emergency protocols that had never been tested. Ambassador Nicole Brooks received an urgent communication from the council chambers, requesting immediate assistance from Earth. The same. Species that had mocked humanity's warnings were now begging for help, their arrogance replaced by desperate hope that humans might possess some solution to the crisis. President Carter convened an emergency meeting with her top military and scientific advisors. Admiral Foster presented the tactical analysis that his teams had been developing since the first warnings were delivered to the Council months earlier. The Void Stalkers exist partially outside our normal space-time continuum, Admiral Foster explained to the assembled leaders. Conventional weapons are worse than useless. They actually feed these entities and make them stronger. However, our research teams have discovered a potential weakness. Dr. Peter Kim stepped forward with the breakthrough that humanity had been working toward since discovering the Architect Crystal. The entities are vulnerable during their phase transitions between dimensions. For brief moments when they shift between realities, they become solid enough for specially designed weapons to affect them. The solution lay in quantum disruption torpedoes, weapons that had been developed using principles found in the Architect ruins. These devices could create localized distortions in space-time that would catch the Void Stalkers during their vulnerable phase shifts and cause real damage to their semi-dimensional forms. We've been producing these weapons in secret for the past 3 months, Admiral Foster continued. Our entire fleet has been retrofitted with quantum disruption systems. It's not much compared to the Council's former armada, but it's specifically designed to fight this enemy. The human fleet consisted of only 300 ships, tiny compared to the 50,000 vessels that the Council had lost. However, each human vessel carried weapons and detection systems that were actually effective against the Void Stalkers, making them infinitely more valuable than the conventional fleets of other species. Captain Susan Blake prepared the UES Defiant for its most important mission as flagship of humanity's response fleet. Her crew had been studying Void Stalker behavior for months, learning their patterns and identifying the precise moments when the quantum disruption weapons would be most effective. Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Martinez made a crucial discovery while analyzing the final data from the Architect Crystal. Hidden in the deepest layers of information was the location of the Void Stalker's dimensional anchor point, a kind of reality bridge that allowed them to phase between dimensions. If we can destroy the anchor point, we can sever their connection to our reality, Lisa explained during the emergency briefing. The entities would be pulled back into their home dimension and trapped there for another million years. The anchor point existed in the space between realities, accessible only through quantum tunneling technology that humans had developed based on architect principles. The mission would require a small strike team to phase shift into the interdimensional space and plant quantum disruption charges at the anchor's location. Commander Jake Thompson volunteered to lead the strike mission, knowing that the chances of survival were minimal. The team would have to navigate through unstable dimensional barriers while avoiding detection by thousands of void stalkers protecting their anchor point. News of Earth's potential solutions spread throughout the remaining galactic powers, creating a desperate alliance between species that had never cooperated before. The Nexari Confederation offered their industrial capacity to mass-produce quantum disruption weapons based on human designs. The Zephyrian Empire provided raw materials and manufacturing facilities. Even the proud Valdorian Republic contributed their advanced power generation systems to support the new weapons. Captain Blake led the human fleet into battle against the Void Stalker swarm, demonstrating for the first time that these entities could be hurt. The quantum disruption torpedoes struck during the creature's phase transitions, causing real damage and preventing them from absorbing the weapon energy. "Target confirmed destroyed," reported the weapons officer aboard the Defiant as the first Void Stalker dissolved completely under quantum disruption fire. The weapons are effective when properly timed. The battle raged across multiple star systems as the combined forces of galactic civilization fought to slow the Void Stalker's advance. Human tactical knowledge guided the engagement, teaching other species when and how to strike at the entities during their vulnerable moments. While the fleet battle continued, Jake Thompson's strike team prepared for their dimensional phase mission. Using modified human quantum drives, they would tunnel through the barriers between realities to reach the Void Stalker's anchor point deep in interdimensional space. "Remember, we only get one chance at this," Jake told his team as they prepared to phase shift. "If we fail, there won't be anything left to come home to." The strike team successfully penetrated the interdimensional barriers and located the massive anchor point that connected the Void Stalkers to normal space. The structure was unlike anything they had ever seen, a twisted amalgamation of dark matter and corrupted energy that pulsed with malevolent life. Jake's team planted their quantum disruption charges around the anchor point's critical support structures, knowing that the explosion would likely trap them in the collapsing dimensional space. As the charges detonated, reality itself began to tear apart around them. The explosion created a cascade failure that severed the Void Stalkers' connection to normal space-time. Across the galaxy, the entities suddenly found themselves being pulled back into their home dimension, unable to maintain their presence in normal reality. Within minutes, thousands of Void Stalkers vanished completely, sucked back into the dimensional prison that had held them for millions of years. The immediate threat ended, but the galaxy was forever changed. The Council's authority had been shattered by their failure to respond to the crisis, and new alliances had formed based on cooperation rather than domination. Earth emerged from the conflict as a major galactic power, not through conquest, but through wisdom and preparation. Ambassador Brooks addressed the reformed Galactic Assembly, reminding them that humanity's early warning could have saved millions of lives if anyone had listened. Earth seeks partnership, not dominance. But next time we warn you of ancient dangers, perhaps you'll remember what happened when our voices were ignored.